You're not the boss of me now, and it's not. I don't remember the rest of the words.
So great. So great.
It's the 90s. Where a plucky kid breaks the fourth wall to narrate to the audience. The twins learn their powers while pranking with their rascally uncle. Vision starts to investigate the weirdness, and Wanda has to step up her game if she wants to control her man. All in this week's episode of WandaVision. Welcome to the MCU Pod, a companion podcast to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm your host, Grant Davis. Alongside me is my co-host, Mike Moody Garcia.
Hey, what's up, Grant?
How's it going, Mikey?
I think you mentioned the early 90s, but I think this was more like early 2000s, like Disney Channel.
You think it's more the aughts?
I think so, but we'll get into it in a bit.
All right. Yeah, we can break down what's going on there. But before that, we are joined here by I wrote this little write up here where I was being snarky and mean to Jeff. I said we were desperate for a guest, and we found this degenerate here named Rage Select. We dragged him in, and it looks like we dragged you right out of the Vision Wanda household here, right into.
Yeah, this is traditional Sokovian fortune teller outfit, male version. Oh, there we go, getting closer.
Yeah, I don't know. You'd have to like really lean into the screen. That's nailed it.
That worked a lot better than last week.
Yeah. I had to adjust the lineup of this. Welcome, Jeff. Jeff is from RageSelect.com. Do you want to tell people what that site is?
It's about video games. You should go there. RageSelect.com. Go there. Video games. That's what I say. That's what
it's Let's Plays and such. Everything video games. Tonight we are streaming the pod live on YouTube. We're talking about WandaVision episode 6, and yes, there will be spoilers in this discussion, as well as some speculation, some theorizing. It's kind of what we do, breaking down stuff, looking at Easter eggs and whatnot. But before we dive into discussing this episode, Mike, can you let everyone know how they can support this podcast?
Yeah, you can subscribe here on YouTube, Apple, Spotify. We have a audio podcast on Apple and Spotify. Everywhere you get podcasts, just go to mcupod.com to find all the places you can sub to the pod. Rate and review us on Apple. If you're watching us live, toss us some comments in the chat below or some questions or whatever you want to say about the show. And use the word pod, capital P-O-D, in front of your comment so we can see it and we can mention it later on.
This week we are discussing, like I said, episode 6. It is titled All New Halloween Spooktacular. It's written by Chuck Hayward and Peter Cameron and directed once again by Matt Shackman. And I have to point out that I think I've been getting a little bit of who's been writing these episodes wrong, because I've been pulling that from IMDb. And I looked over on Wikipedia, and Wikipedia is a bit more specific about who per episode. Whereas I think I was just like getting the first two on top billing of writing on IMDb. So a little bit annoying. Apologies to the writers who are all listening to this and, gritting their teeth. This synopsis for this episode is: disturbances on Halloween separate Wanda from Vision, who looks into anomalous activity in Westview. So let's go ahead and start off by going around the rooms and giving our not hot takes, but our hot quakes.
Hot quakes.
Jeff.
Well, I just can't say that with much enthusiasm.
It's hard,
Hot quakes.
Jeff.
Quake is a character.
Mike and I do a Star Trek pod.
Rhymes with take.
And we do hot freaks for that one.
Okay.
Freaks. Yeah. And
a lot of stepping over chairs.
A lot of stepping over chairs, stepping over each other.
Big time.
So we asked the audience here, and they came up with hot quakes. I'm not sure they're proud of it. I'm not sure we are either, but that's kind of what we're going with for now.
Okay.
We haven't heard your thoughts on any of WandaVision. So if you want to give your thoughts overall on the season thus far, as well as this specific season, go ahead.
Yeah, I absolutely love WandaVision. I was looking at the timeline for the MCU over the weekend, and I realized that in 2020 I've been kind of like not enthused about the MCU, and I think that it's because Avengers Endgame was such a climactic conclusion, and I know that there were, a few movies. There was Spider-Man Far From Home after that, but all of 2020, it's like we were missing the MCU, and then WandaVision started up, and it was such a breath of fresh air because I feel like some of the latter MCU movies have started to run on a kind of formulaic autopilot with, here's the villain, here's the fight. It's all a little samey, not as much style differentiation as like in the early days or in phase 2 or early phase 3. And like, I just sat there in the first 2 episodes and laughed. Like I thought that they were just exceptionally well-written episodes of an old TV show. I know there are a lot of people who said, they should have put the whole first 3 episodes into one episode. I could have watched a whole season worth of throwback TV. I thought the writing was great. I thought the jokes were funny. I loved the way they did the doofy special effects, like in the first and second episode. I love all the theme songs and all of the montages at the beginning. So I've been really, really happy with the series up until, I've been really happy with the series, period. Including right now, as I just got finished watching episode 6. Yeah. I really like seeing this because it's so weird and so interesting, and I think it makes for an interesting departure from just, I don't know. There's a lot of, here's a bad guy, hit the bad guy falls over, everybody wins. And I like that it's not entirely clear still in 6 out of 9 episodes exactly what's going on here. Like we're getting little puzzle pieces, but it's not so obvious that I feel like I could just put the pieces together in my head. So that's where I am right now.
Right on. Mike, what do you think?
I'm there with you, Jeff. I've been talking about how if this were just riffing on sitcoms for the entire 9 episodes, I'd be just super happy with this show, and that would be fine. But we are getting something a little different now. But I really enjoyed this episode. Lots of big things happened in this episode. And just when you thought you'd gotten the image of Vision dying a horribly violent death out of your head, they took another stab at killing him in a very violent way this week. So thank you for those nightmares, Marvel. So yeah, even though I appreciated like the Pietro backstory, the stuff we got with the dual storyline, continuing the Westview storyline, as well as like the sword fugitive trio, like Scooby-Doo pretty hard on the outside. This was probably, even though I love that stuff, this was probably one of my least favorite episodes of WandaVision so far. And like I was telling Grant, something to do with the fact that I kind of detest those mid-90s, early aughts kind of Disney Channel type sitcoms this seemed to be aping. I know you mentioned Malcolm in the Middle, and I did see some of that, but it just felt more like Even Stevens, kind of like those really obnoxious like early aughts Disney Channel sitcoms. It just makes me want to shoot the television. Like there was definitely some clever stuff in this sitcom world in this episode, and I appreciated that. This definitely added, like WandaVision always does, many more complex layers to that sitcom trope. But yeah, I'm just not a fan of that genre, so it wasn't like a huge win for me. But the story overall also kind of seemed to slow down a lot here. So we can get a lot more like explanation of things, like why Pietro is different. But even though we got like some exposition, I still don't like trust any of it. So that's kind of a little frustrating. I did really enjoy the ending. It left me at a place where I'm very much anticipating what's next and what the new status quo will be for all the characters, like Darcy getting sucked into the town. So I'm still in, and happy Halloween, everybody.
Yeah, for my part, I think that something interesting about the overall structure of this show, going decade by decade with television, is how that ends up fusing with the actual show that we're watching, you start seeing the narrative, the WandaVision show within the show starts feeling a little bit more cohesive with what we are watching going on with like Agent Wu and Darcy out on the outside world, because structurally storytelling is getting a little bit more complex, a little bit more nuanced, having character in it. And so I feel like how that coincides with the outside world narrative blending with what's going on in there and seeing a little bit more of a crossover between them, Vision leaving the bubble to come out to the outside world, people breaking down and people like freezing in the process in Westview while people on the outside are commenting on it. Like all this stuff feels like they're breaking down the barriers of the conceit between the fictional world and the real MCU. And in that regard, I'm liking it. Yeah, Jeff.
Well, I was going to ask, do you think I didn't think about it until you were saying this, and it sounds so stupid saying it out loud. So you guys just tell me if I'm stupid, but like, do you think that was always the intention, that as it moves through the eras of sitcoms that get more and more sophisticated as you go from the 60s to the 70s to the 80s to the 90s, that like the level of class consciousness and something like Malcolm in the Middle was above, your Full House, Family Ties, which was above, your kind of 70s Brady Bunch, which was above Leave It to Beaver, that was always intentional to essentially ramp up the complexity of what's going on in the world. And in a way, maybe you could even say, kind of mirrors Wanda coming to like learning what exactly is going on, where it's very fairy tale.
Oh, yeah.
But the more that happens, the more threads come out, the more it gets pulled on, and the more the whole facade starts to break down.
Mm-hmm.
It's the genius of the structure. Yeah. As storytelling is maturing, as they're breaking down from the fantasy world, Wanda's having to come to grips more and more with with her trauma and how she's been avoiding that. I love that you brought up the class issue of Malcolm in the Middle, and the great scene in the beginning of Wanda in the bathroom that looks just like Jane Kaczmarek. Here, I'll pop that back on the screen. All this family just kind of crammed into this house, and they're trying to make ends meet, and things are a little bit grittier and raw. That's quite a contrast to the 50s, everything prim and proper, and the biggest thing is dinner being a little bit late, So how they've moved beyond that to kind of mirror the complexity of the story, I think I'm really appreciating how well constructed it is. And then, this one breaking down that fourth wall with having the son, I think it's only Tommy who addresses the audience. I'm not sure. Do you guys know if Billy also does?
I think they both did.
Because I got the sense that every time Billy was partially aware, but he always seemed to redirect it toward Tommy, in which case I was thinking maybe there's something correlating to his speed ability that allows him to kind of break that fourth wall, like maybe Pietro has this awareness as well. Anyway, that's getting ahead of myself. I like how this is playing. They've dropped the live audience, the laugh track. They are talking a little bit more directly to the audience, although it's still the story going on here. And yeah, I think that outside of all of that, Vision figuring things out and the tension rising there and not being able to really walk back how fake this is for Wanda, her brother calling her out, she's having to confront everything. We're gearing up to the end, and I'm really fascinated with how they keep ramping things up here. Because
did you get the impression, it's especially in the first part when Vision was in the house with Wanda, that there was like an internal conflict going there where he seemed to be flip-flopping between like almost being controlled and then almost confronting her and then flipping back to being controlled, and then
Yeah, I mean, he walked down the stairs, it was kind of awkward, right? Like there's this stare down between them, and then it's like, hey honey, haha, how's everything going? But I was like, you guys were in a knockdown fight where you're floating in the air, like vampires and What We Do in the Shadows. Like, each other.
Yeah, it seems like her ability to control him or to suppress his awareness is really fading, especially at the end of this episode. And even one of the kids commented on it, like, something's not right with mom and dad. And it kind of makes you wonder. I'm a little worried. Like, I have a lot of questions about, like, not just what Vision knows and comprehends about what's going on, but, you know, you can ask the same thing about Agnes, right? You can ask the same thing about any of the townspeople, because sometimes we get scenes of that seem to hint that they're aware that Wanda is controlling them and they're trying to appease her. But most of the time it feels like they're all just under this mind control and unaware of what's going on. So there's questions about, like, their level of comprehension about what's happening. And I have no reason not to trust, whoever is writing this show to, like, explain that in a way that makes sense, or, thematically, at least for the story. But I don't know. Do you think they will explain those type of things? Do you guys have those kind of questions?
I was actually just thinking about that while you were talking, and it seems, I mean, I don't know if this is, I've just had this thought, so it could be only kind of a half-baked thing, but it seems like the closer proximity that any character has to Wanda and Vision, like, the more conscious they are of, trying to make the fantasy work, but still being a character. And then, like, when you go out to Vision's coworkers, right, they're kind of running on autopilot. And then when you get out to the edge, like, there's just zombie, standing there not doing anything. Like, these people aren't doing it all. Right? Yeah. Or almost just like that the priority inside of the hexagon is so much telling Wanda's story that anybody that gets, the further you get away from Wanda, because we saw, I mean, I don't know if you're going chronologically, but we saw how Agnes is a very aware character, but then when she gets far enough away, she just kind of is losing it. So
do you think that Agnes and Herb, maybe for that matter, both have a degree of heightened awareness of what's going on? Like, Herb seems to be like, hey, did you want me do you want me to do something different for you, when he knows that Wanda's upset? Like, he has an awareness of, your little puppet game isn't going the way you planned. Do you want me to fix that? And Agnes has shown that a few times too. But here it does seem like Agnes was under Wanda's control when she's frozen at the edge of Ellis Lane, and she can't really escape there. So it's like, do they become a little bit more complicit, or like aware, and they're just kind of playing the game because they're afraid, but they're closer players to Wanda?
I think so. I think there's also, like, this fun, like, metatextual element to it. Obviously, like, there's always this metatextual, like, subtext in this show. Like, the further away we physically get, like you were saying, Jeff, from Wanda, the more the characters or the people of the town are just don't have personalities and are just zombified. And it kind of reminds me of how when you have extras on a TV show, or you have characters who don't have any speaking lines, you don't really care about them as a viewer. They don't do much. And maybe as actors, they're way less aware of the machinations of what's going on behind the scene. So it kind of reflects that, right? The people who aren't, like, part of the central cast have little say in how the show goes, and have little awareness of, I guess, the political maneuvering within the structure of the show and all that.
It can also be something where, if their consciousness is basically locked, if the people that are on, the show understand, the further that they get away from Wanda, the less agency they have until they're just basically frozen. If I was in that situation, I would want to be Wanda's next door neighbor, because then at least you're going to get a lot of speaking lines and
not freeze outside when you get forgotten on Halloween night. Do you see, like, the air coming out of their mouths? And, like, I was like, there's little kids just freezing outside and they can't move.
Yeah, I don't want my hanging up what is it, like, my laundry for the rest of my life while I'm crying on the inside, like that one woman.
Yeah.
So let's take a step back and let's talk about the intro that happened, as well as the episode style. And Mike, I know that you have a little bit of disagreement on what decade era we might be kind of dealing with. I want to pop this comment up first by IT Johan, who says, I grew up with Malcolm in the Middle, so this was a lot of fun. Also, the show exploring the boundaries for the effects and powers on display here intrigues me to no end. I mean, definitely the intro itself, as well as I think the kids turning and talking to the camera, was very evocative of Malcolm in the Middle, a show that was earlier than off The Office and Modern Family, which were a lot more mockumentary style, everyone turning and talking to the camera thing, which I think we're going to get next week. Which is why I would argue it's more trying to echo the 90s, that as well as like everything else feels decade by decade, like what were the big turning point kind of shows.
Yeah, Malcolm in the Middle actually debuted in 2000. But
really?
Yeah. But I think like we've seen in the other episodes of WandaVision, they're just mixing similar shows, right? Like I think didn't the Brady Bunch one have some Mary Tyler Moore in it too?
2000?
Mm-hmm.
How old was I? Jeez.
So wait a minute. Does that mean that if there was a 90s episode that would have just been Friends? Because I really want to see an episode of Friends with WandaVision in it. Yeah.
Well, Full House also took place in the 90s. It was like late 80s, early 90s. So I guess they fudged it like as Full House, the 90s.
Yeah. I guess you're right. Huh. I totally would have thought Malcolm in the Middle started in 90s.
Almost.
I don't know. That was way off.
That's all right, Grant.
It premiered January 9th, 2000.
I was going to say, as a proud member of Generation X, I could say nobody remembers us or the 90s or anything that happened. Yeah. It's just 10 years lost to time.
You two, get out of here.
Life is unfair.
I think that, from the intro to seeing, that's the other thing I wanted to bring up. When we see Pietro run around, we now have a vision of we now see what his superpowers look like within this world. But I'm wondering if you guys had any thoughts if we were seeing the approach that Marvel took to Quicksilver running, if we were seeing the approach that Fox took to Quicksilver running, or if we're seeing some third category amalgamation that is more WandaVision's hokey 90s 2000 era special effects white wispy lines vision or Quicksilver running. What do you guys think of the effects? I guess
I got the impression that it was very much like a Malcolm in the Middle Scrubs kind of weekly low effort special effect kind of thing about, you get the point. It's fine. You get the point.
Everyone else freeze while he runs around kind of quickly, and then we'll speed it all up. Mm-hmm. Kind of effect. Yeah. It didn't feel like the quality of special effects we get, especially like when Wanda and Vision burst out of the bubble and you still see them using their powers on display, which is why I'm thinking this is just still his powers being expressed under the veneer of the bubble 90s aughts conceit.
Yeah, I don't really remember what those special effects looked or felt like in the movies. Like I remember in the Fox movies, the slow down sequences with Evan Peters were fun, but like in the perspective of somebody looking at that, I don't remember really how that looks, but I don't think it looked this corny.
It is kind of corny, yeah. In the very beginning, of the episode, we get, I guess not like on the previously on, we get a shot of other Pietro. So they are really clearly drawing this line between Aaron Tyler Johnson's Pietro and the new, I forget the other actor's name.
Evan Peters'
version of Pietro. But those bullet holes, we get to see in another disturbing scene where Wanda seems like she brought the corpse back again, because I'm getting ahead of myself. I had this whole other structure here, but I do want to talk about Pietro and what's going on here, because there is this idea that if we're seeing the Evan Peters version, that there's a possibility what Wanda did was bend reality and pull in the Evan Peters version of Quicksilver from a different multiverse timeline. Just like her powers are able to not only toggle reality here, but also like jump between realities. And if she's yanking in a version of Quicksilver from a different reality, he looks like Evan Peters. This is how they are able to bring the Fox version of the X-Men into the world of Marvel. This is why we're hearing rumors of seeing the different Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield or Tobey Maguire, that are going to be in the next Spider-Man movie. They're bleeding through these different realities and saying all of these were real. What happened, to paraphrase Lost.
Maybe, but that scene that you pulled up now with Pietro, Evan Peters Pietro as this dead body with the bullet holes that happened to Aaron Taylor Johnson Pietro, doesn't it feel like a signal that that's not what's going on?
Right. That she asked someone else,
right, and it's just the MCU winking at us saying, "Hey, we cast the same guy from the other movies. Maybe we'll do something with that later, but we don't really have a plan." This is fun, and Evan Peters is a great actor, so here you go. I don't know.
I mean, for a show that feels like it's been very deliberate in the move that it's been making, I would be surprised if it was so kind of arbitrary. Yeah. I don't know. I really like the idea, especially if Spider-Man Far From Home was about laying the groundwork of the concept of a multiverse into the MCU, that like if the entire next phase of the MCU is basically dragging the mutants out of the Fox universe and into the Marvel universe and dragging other Spider-Men, and that's so exciting. I could be more excited. I want the X-Men in this universe so bad.
Yeah,
I mean, we got this comment from Will Morris who says, "I think it might be insane I might be insane for thinking this, but I think WandaVision might be setting up mutants, given they alluded to Monica being changed on a molecular level by passing through the bubble back and forth."
Yeah,
are we just gonna get like Herb and everyone that's inside the bubble?
Well,
those are the X-Men.
Aren't her kids essentially mutants? Like they weren't exposed to gamma rays. They were just kind of born in a weird way, and now they have powers. That's kind of like a mutant origin story.
Right. Mm-hmm. Although they're also demon spawn who manifested from thin air. She didn't
unconfirmed that they're demon spawn.
We don't know what's going on with these kids. It's a little bit creepy.
But yeah, there is definitely something to that Evan Peters casting. But I don't know what it is, because the show seems to be telling us it's both things. It's Evan Peters, you remember him from the Fox movies, and now it's like we're literally showing you that this version of Quicksilver has a history that is in line with the Aaron Taylor Johnson version, and none of that happened to the Evan Peters version that we ever saw in the Fox movies. But there is definitely narrative ways they could meld those two together, or make it be Evan Peters. By the way, what did you guys think of Evan Peters in this episode?
I love him.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I thought he did an excellent job as kind of I don't know. I love his voice, because it's like he knows what's going on and he's like accepting to a fault to Wanda of what she's doing, but then he's such a destructive impulse that it's like, everything he does, you want to say stop. And so it's interesting that whether he's being controlled by her or whether he's just being subtly influenced, I don't know. He's also seems like a very different, I mean, maybe this goes back to the previous point, but he seems like a very different, he's more like the character that we saw in the X-Men universe, being a little bit more flippant than the character that we saw in the MCU, even though I don't remember Age of Ultron all that well.
No, he's definitely playing the same kind of carefree character that he was playing in the Fox X-Men movies. Like, It seems like that guy who has a little bit of a shared history, but maybe not necessarily.
Yeah.
Like, one testing him, he gives a, in a very Malcolm in the Middle fashion, there's a flashback scene. They have a couple of flashback scenes here, and he has one where they're in Sokovia and they're getting fish during Halloween, their version of Halloween.
Racist.
And super racist. And Wanda doesn't have that same memory. She's like, I don't remember it happening that way. And later she's like kind of quizzing him on a couple things. Like she recognizes that he doesn't look the same, but he must to some degree have the same essence that she still recognizes him.
I think
if
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I was going to ask, okay, did they ever establish in the Fox universe that Quicksilver is Magneto's kid?
They did.
They did?
Yeah.
Because wasn't there a question about their parents that he just like dodges entirely?
Well, he does say at one point that he thought that the bubble world that she created, that their parents would really like that. And they talked about, he talked about their parents, again, still seemingly in Sokovia, having them go out to Halloween together. So I don't know if, and they make a mention of the orphanage, and he doesn't back away from at one point later being an orphan. So,
it's a fun trick, right? Because we're getting essentially the really fun, entertaining wise ass of the Fox Quicksilver, but he has the history of the Eric Taylor Johnson Quicksilver, and it's making us just question what's going to happen, and it's making me super compelled to figure out what this is. And it was just a smart move getting Evan involved in the MCU. I mean, I think he's great, and he maybe doesn't get the credit he deserves a lot as a comedic, dramatic actor, and this is a huge showcase for him. Like, you think about American Horror Story, it just got more ridiculous and unwatchable every. He's in all those seasons, and he always found like the insane characters he plays on that seem vulnerable and human, right? And he's doing that here. Like, Pietro is wacky. He's like the wise ass Uncle Jesse or Cousin Andy from Weeds, right? But he's also really warm and self-aware and complex. And I hope he sticks around.
He's a good compliment to Wanda, especially as we're seeing in this episode. She's gotten much more loose about how she's expressing her powers around everyone. She's dropping a little bit of that veneer, and she knows she's controlling everyone. They kind of know she's controlling them. And Pietro, like in talking to her, is kind of earnest about like, hey, you know what? I see what you're doing here, and I think it's kind of cool. Like, how are you doing this? Which, when he said that, though, were you guys at all suspicious that this isn't Pietro at all, and this is someone else fishing for information?
There's so many questions. Yeah,
because, you know, we got that lingering question about our X-Files trio. We haven't talked much about the B plot with them, but we saw that when they were investigating everything, that Darcy pulls up. She in very 90s fashion, she hacks the whole system, and she quickly pulls up this information that she's just got to pass along. And I'm wondering, like, what was that secret information? Oh, this is the blood test. I pulled up the wrong image. Is this her hacking? There we go. The Hayward thing. I was like, did he somehow get an agent in there that could play Pietro? And he's there fishing information?
I mean, we're all suspicious about this version of Quicksilver. Is he, like, last week we talked a lot about perhaps there's another entity and not Wanda controlling all this, and she made a deal with that entity. Is it Mephisto? What is it, right? And then Evan Peters shows up. It's like, oh, is he the other entity masked as Pietro? Maybe. Now it's like, oh, is he a sword agent? I don't know.
Well, he is definitely running around at super speed. So if it is someone else, it's another person with superpowers that's able to infiltrate. So maybe this is Doctor Strange. Maybe they got Doctor Strange. Hey, you need to go in there. You can just kind of slide on in, look like someone else. Try and impersonate, but why wouldn't he look like the other version of Quicksilver?
Maybe the chat can help us. Chat, list all the speedsters in the Marvel universe in the chat, and we'll rate your answers.
Well, let's talk about the Halloween costumes, because they did a Halloween episode. It's fun and it's corny. And
so was this episode supposed to air around Halloween? Because I know because of the pandemic, they aired stuff out of order, right?
Man, it felt like it, right?
Yeah.
This felt like it would have perfectly aired during Halloween, but also felt kind of like a Modern Family kind of episode in that, like, how much they really give to the costumes that they're doing here, and then having what was hers, a Sokovian fortune teller, a luchador, I guess is what they're trying to claim he's supposed to be, that or a traffic light or a half shucked corn or a booger.
Okay, luchadors have masks that cover their faces, man. Come on.
Yeah.
They don't paint their face red. Maybe some of them do.
When we saw the kids, we have Tommy, who I guess is playing Speed, is his name when he gets older in the comics, whereas Billy is Wiccan in the comics. I thought he was kind of looking a little bit like Doctor Strange there as well, but I guess he's Wiccan when
that's Wiccan.
And here's a picture of them when they're older in the comics, Speed and Wiccan. And then Agnes, maybe a little bit too much on the nose, looks like a witch. There's a lot of theories that she's a witch in real life. She's pulling the strings as well. So to have her look like a witch and actually straight up go crazy and start cackling like a witch before Vision touches her head and puts her under again, I thought it was a clever nod. I think they're just kind of fucking with us, the audience, at this point.
Man, I'm going like full on Westworld here, but that particular scene reminded me of, like, why doesn't Vision know what an Avenger is? Like, what's going on there? Is it maybe just the fact that since he doesn't have the what is it, the soul gem or whatever in his head anymore, that Wanda's just like completely rebuilt his personality, but just out of the stuff that she remembers or she's left that out? I don't know. That was an interesting note.
That's the first thing I thought of. Like, okay, he doesn't have the thing that animated him anymore. We saw her in a previous episode steal his body and bring him into this, this fictional town she created. And so she's giving him a personality and creating his memories, right? So maybe that's why she's if he does have any memories of the Avengers, she's somehow suppressing them.
Yeah, I mean, if she's trying to control him and not let him remember the outside world, I get why he wouldn't also remember the Avengers or have any kind of knowledge of there being an outside world. But still intriguing on what he does know about what's going on.
Like, does he just think life is different eras of a sitcom? Because he seems to roll with it up until like an episode ago.
It does seem like there's a little bit of this childishness to Vision, that he himself is a baby, just kind of experiencing everything and only just barely starting to question what was going on. Why are they hearing the laugh track? Why are people laughing off screen? What is this? Where'd they go? Why is my kid turning and talking to the camera?
I want to go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, also, is it weird that when he was, this is so inconsequential, but when he was trying to like leave the force field, why didn't he just phase through it? That's like one of the 3 things that Vision is able to do, and we saw him phase through the couch earlier. So,
right,
yeah, it seems like his powers are all supposed to be based off of her powers, right? And yet, when he has to kind of push through this, it would seem like everything is a little bit copacetic between them, that like he needs to get through that wall. That shouldn't be a problem, but it had some sort of magnetic grip that's just started ripping his skin off to pull him back into the bubble, to the point where it feels like the bubble is pretty much solely constructed for him. I wonder if I don't think other people, human people, would step out of there and be ripped back in, right?
Well, it definitely had an effect on Monica Rambeau, right? Even if it didn't show, her X-ray now just like full of white light inside.
She's down now.
Yeah.
I want to bring up real quick. IT Johan had a comment. that he loved the design and callback to the original comics. And of course, those are great. But it was just funny how like they had a flimsy explanation, but an explanation for what Wanda's wearing and an explanation for what Vision's wearing. But Quicksilver is just 90s comics Quicksilver.
Hey, I got a lightning bolt costume, whatever.
Yeah.
I like that they just rolled Speed in with it and just had Speed wear the same outfit. It worked.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty amusing. So we touched on this a little bit, but it seemed like the stuff that's going on outside of the bubble was pretty much on the back burner this week. There was a little bit of a, the trio has parted ways with Haywood. He's taking control, and we had a good discussion last week, Mike, about how it's easy for us, the audience, to just take Haywood as the villain, as the easy villain here. But in looking at what Wanda's doing, us, the audience, we're a little bit too eager to defend her and think that she's our same hero from Avengers, but she's a villain. She's controlling people, and they are freezing to death on the edges of this city and crying and being left outside. And I don't know, is she even feeding these people? Like, it's been about a week. Are they starving if she doesn't think to feed them? Like,
we were wondering, like, is she doing this, or is someone else, a bigger entity, doing this? And when she was talking to Pietro, she takes credit, right? But also says, I don't know how I'm doing it. So there's a gray area there. Maybe it's not her. But if you're talking about Hayward, is that his name?
Haywood,
the sword director. I really like what they did with him in this episode. Like, usually the last few episodes, he's just kind of a nuisance, and he's kind of that, what is the name of that? Thunderbolt Ross, just a thorn in the hero's side, right? But I really appreciated the scene with him in this episode where he's trying to justify his like overt brute force approach in the last episode to trying to fix the situation. And he tries to justify it by bringing up the trauma of the past 5 years, right? Since he was one of the folks left behind after the Thanos snap. So he tries to justify it. I didn't agree with him. I'm on Monica's side, obviously. He's a cowardly prick. But it's great. He's a red hat bitch. So, but it's great to see that there are these lingering emotional effects that people have from that Thanos snap, right? And that maybe the snap has radicalized people and kind of dampened their empathy and just put them in this harsh, like, survival mode. Like, oh shit, another superhero event's happening. We got to put the brakes on this no matter what. That seems to be where he's coming from. I think it's super cool how this show is just building and growing the larger MCU by exploring, the emotional impact of things that happen in the movies, right?
Right.
And also it's making that stuff really relevant to this show.
It's funny. It might just be because I just marathoned Infinity War and Endgame last weekend back to back, but like, it's funny how I don't really see Haywood as like a bad guy. I mean, I recognize that he's like in opposition to the people that we've got lined up as a main character. But when you think about the ramifications, again, of what he was talking about, of the fact that the world knows that like this extra dimensional or this alien entity just came down and snapped its fingers and like screwed up everybody's life for 5 years. And so the idea of just like, we should try to understand what this person is doing that's got like a town of 800 people completely under her whims. And it's like, well, wait, how do we know she's not going to snap her fingers and then the entirety of New Jersey is going to be like walking automatons? I would think that after something like the events of Infinity War and Endgame, that an organization like SWORD would get a little bit more tetchy and proactive about trying to keep people from doing things that affect huge areas of civilians.
Absolutely. I mean, I appreciate that we have both sides kind of in conflict in this story, and showing like the people who are like, holy shit, we have to get a grip on this, because like you said, this wiped out half the population, and she's now controlling people. And for how long? How are people surviving in this situation? We don't know the full extent of the damage she's wreaking on this town. But from what we can see of people not moving in their house for days on end, are they eating? Are they being cared for? Is she going to allow just a genocide of a bunch of people in this town?
Or even just even just the line of dialogue that Vision's coworker has, where it sounds like Wanda's control has them all in constant pain, and it's just like, well, stop it. You might have some stuff you need to work through emotionally, but like if you're keeping a whole town of people like frozen in pain and mentally manipulated, that's not like oopsie behavior. That's like, no, cut it out. Stop it.
And it was such a powerful moment when Haywood mentioned the snap, and all of a sudden, like, you're kind of already understanding his viewpoint, because this is some dangerous shit she's doing to these people. And if it grows more at the end of this episode, she could possibly suck more people into her realm and do whatever she wants with them. That's extremely disturbing and dangerous. But when he mentioned the snap, and you realize that he has trauma from that, and he's even more activated to do something extreme to shut this down, his viewpoint resonated with me even more, and it felt like really powerful. And there was conflict with me as a viewer, because I was like, I like Monica Rambeau, and trying to be this empathetic person that I try to be every day. I want to side with her, but I understand his viewpoint for sure.
Just real quick, how long do we have a concept of how long this has been going on? Because I feel like every time we go outside of WandaVision land, it's like the same night. Like time seems to be going in a relatively straight line, like maybe a few hours, but not like days. I get the impression that there was like the day they showed up, and then maybe a couple days later they set up the sword base, and then that everything from that point forward has kind of been going on over the course of
Do you think
one or two
multiple
nights
episodes might be happening in the same day? Like last week's episode and this episode might be the same day.
Yeah, I almost think that it's real time, because they got the missile that they tried to assassinate Wanda with and just like put it down. It still had the red glowing stuff on it. It seems to me like it's all just kind of going in the same night, that it's literally like 30 minutes, 40 minutes an episode, almost in real time. I don't know. It's a question.
Yeah, they said that Wanda stole Vision's body 9 days ago from Heath Bones. So, I guess it's been about a week of her doing this experiment, this little bubble world experiment. Speaking of experiments, we get another weird little interjection going on into this TV show. In this commercial, we get another commercial break, and it's for a yogurt for kids called Yo Magic. This commercial went dark.
The most disturbing part of this episode, for sure.
This
no.
Who's just, his hand is so weak, struggling to open this yogurt. It was brutal. Go ahead.
Do you have a picture of him when he's got his face on?
I don't.
Okay, because I was gonna say, this with the stop animation, the claymation, it gives me a good excuse to bring up. It reminded me of the most horrifying thing that children should never see, which was the claymated Adventures of Mark Twain.
Yes.
Where there was like a 10-minute segment with Satan that has scarred me for life.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and it's brutal. I was thinking the same thing, and this poor kid. It's this idea. What was the tagline? Do you guys remember what the tagline was? Is it in the picture? Let me see.
It might have been in the picture.
No, it doesn't say it there. I want to say it was something like, "Yo, magic is for survivors" or something like that.
Yes. It was like, Yo Magic is for survivors. Yeah, something like that.
And it's obviously talking about her magic as a survival coping mechanism for her emotional grief, and at the same time it's something that is starving and rotting away who she is, because she's kind of just retreating to and relying on this magic. And I wonder if there's something else additional on top of that about how the magic, how just using magic, it has to come from somewhere else. And however she's performing this magic, if the laws of thermodynamics mean she's taking this energy from somewhere else, and she might be draining and killing people elsewhere, maybe in the multiverse, or however she's performing this magic. I don't know. What'd you guys make of it?
Dark. Just very, very, it's just like there's not very much connective tissue to anything else outside of just like, well, that was horrifically dark. Yikes. So yeah, I appreciated the production budget.
Yeah, I didn't expect it to take such a turn, because none of the other commercials, they've been like kind of like winkingly dark, right? The other commercials, but this one just took on a whole new like dark, scary resonance. And you got a comment here. You want to read that?
Yeah, Koksky Production says, I'm calling it the shark represents whoever manipulated Wanda into doing this whole thing in the first place. And yeah, that theory, like when Quicksilver asks her, or Pietro asks her, like, how are you doing this? And she's like, I don't know. I was very sad and all alone, and that's all I remember. And then all of a sudden this thing just started happening. It's very likely that she was in such a weak emotional state that she was able to be easily manipulated. Think of someone like the Shadow King or whoever else could just pop in there and take over and manipulate. I mean, I know we did that in Legion, but it could be someone like that, that's that's giving her something that in a way she wants, but she thinks she's doing this herself.
Yeah, Koski also had a good comment. This episode's commercial, I think, has the most to do with the overall plot out of all the commercials so far. And yeah, I mean, the metaphor seems pretty clear, right? Like without the magic or the hex that she's controlling, she wouldn't survive her emotional trauma. Yeah.
As Will says, as in someone might be feeding off of Wanda's magic.
This might be a little bit of a broad reach, but do you guys think that there's going to be an evil mastermind that we all have to shoot laser bolts at the end? Or do you think that this is just going to be like, no, there was no Thanos. It's just a person that was sad that had this power that they didn't know how to use, and they accidentally screwed a bunch of shit up with it.
The latter would be a lot more interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what I want. And it just, at this point, we're at episode 6, right? There's 3 more episodes to go. Revealing a big bad at this point just wouldn't feel like dramatically interesting, right?
But at the same time, I feel like if it is Wanda, at a certain point, she needs to acknowledge a degree of awareness of her actions, right? It can't be, I don't know how this happened, and then that's just kind of how it ends, right? For us, the audience. In real life, shit could go that way, and you don't know how things suddenly turned and they got awful. But for us, the audience, in a storytelling device, I feel like she has to have like some sort of turn and acknowledge that, or like you guys had mentioned last week, Mike, this idea of the split personality, and there's 2 Wandas operating within one who's driving this and the other one who's just emotionally feeding off of it because she so desperately needs what this world is giving because she's retreating from her grief.
The language she used in that scene you just mentioned about, I was feeling very sad and lonely, and all of a sudden this started happening. That is total code for I have a separate personality that I'm not aware of.
Tyler Durden stepped in and just slowly helped me out with this.
Tyler Durden, Mr. Robot.
I'm Spoilers. Sorry, everyone,
Hello, friend.
for those properties. And then I guess we talked a little bit about Vision kind of going on this investigation. He's now lying to Wanda, saying that he's part of Neighborhood Watch. He's kind of challenging her a little bit. There's that line where he's like, "Wanda, be good," and before he scoots on out the door. It seems that her grip on him is weakening to the point where, I don't know, I thought when he exited the bubble, he would just become the corpse. And the fact that he wasn't makes me wonder if there is a future for Vision as a character outside of this WandaVision bubble.
There was an interesting theory in the comments. I'm going to find it here. Oh, yeah. Okay. Will Morris said, we're talking about the costume designs earlier. He says, speaking of designs, anybody else notice that Vision's color scheme makes him look like a normal size Sentinel? You guys remember the Sentinels from X-Men?
Yeah.
Ew.
They were the robots
purple
who
and
hunted humans, hunted mutants and killed them. Wouldn't it be a wild turn if Vision ends up being like a Sentinel?
I think the dead version of him, where the color kind of drains out and he looks that purple and silver, that could be lending itself more than, I guess, the one that I have on screen here. This is the green, silver, red, and yellow one that's going on. But yeah, maybe the corpse version could lend itself to Sentinel design. I don't know. That's crazy.
With Wanda now using magic and magic now introduced into the MCU, is it possible that this is Dormammu or something from Doctor Strange trying to like make an incursion through like magical means? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it is supposed to be that Wanda, or Scarlet Witch, if she eventually ever goes by that name, is supposed to be in the next Doctor Strange movie. It's supposed to be another character, and there was rumors that Doctor Strange might first make his own appearance in WandaVision before that happens. I don't know, but
like maybe Doctor Strange taught Dormammu how to bargain, and he made a bargain with Scarlet Witch to make her happy.
Dormammu, I've come to.
I'm all about bargaining now, guys. Great deals. I'm getting some great deals here. Things are great for Dormammu. And then, okay, the end sequence when we see yeah, go ahead.
Oh, one quick thing. Does anybody have any idea who Monica Rambeau's friend is? I only watched Captain Marvel one time. Right. Do we think that Carol Danvers is going to show up?
No, she said, wait, what was the kind of specialist it was supposed to be? Aeronautical engineer?
Didn't she use a male pronoun?
She said my aeronautical engineer friend, but I don't remember if it was a male pronoun.
I want to say that she did, because I immediately when she mentioned, my friend is going to help get me in.
You glitched there for a second. What's up?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think she did mention a male pronoun, because immediately when she said, "Oh, my friend's going to help get me inside the bubble," I immediately ruled out Captain Marvel, but I could be wrong.
I think last week we were speculating on like who's an aerospace engineer or whatever. Randy was on our show last week, Jeff, and was saying it could potentially be Mr. Fantastic showing up. Reed Richards popping it. Oh, there you go. And I was like, well, if we're on
or Dormammu.
Dormammu, I got a great bargain on this plane.
He just runs that new used car lot that got put in there. It's just right. Dormammu's pre-owned auto. He'll get you into a Saturn, like a 97 Saturn, like no problem.
You want the gap insurance.
I was also saying if we're bringing in people from the X-Men universe. Could it be Hank McCoy? We know that he built the Blackbird.
I would hope
don't know.
so.
Could be there. Hank McCoy from this universe is just an aerospace engineer and is good buddies with Monica Rambeau. Hasn't been turned into an X-Men yet, but once he passes into that, what if they send in an elite team into the bubble? They get expelled and they all become the children of the atom. It's the new X-Men.
Sure.
And then they start just having babies, and there's just more X-Men everywhere.
I'm with it.
It could be that there's a big blast. Okay, so I'm sorry. The end sequence. When we have Vision push through the bubble, we get a series of things that happen in fairly quick succession. First, we get I'm going the wrong way. We get his kid. We get Wiccan suddenly realizing his powers. He's got this telekinesis. He's able to tell his mom, and then Wanda goes ballistic. There's that great line where Pietro's like, well, it's not like your dead husband can die twice. She shoots him across the room. Funny, but also just underscores the brutality of what she's going through here. But when she freezes everyone in place and then just suddenly is able to shift and expand the bubble, she does have full control of this construct that's going on here. For however much we're talking about like other people pulling the strings and manipulating her, they may be manipulating her, but she takes power here and she pushes and expands this, swallowing up Darcy into this. It'll be funny to see if she becomes a superhero or what. I don't know. But we get clowns and a circus from this whole thing. I don't know. It was just kind of the idea that she's pushing the barriers even more when we already saw a bunch of people frozen on the outskirts of this thing just seems to imply she's stretching her powers too thin and everything's going to collapse pretty soon.
It was a pretty powerful moment because you think that I thought she was going to teleport to the edge and pull him back in. But instead, she just increases the border or the barrier or the range.
Right.
And then sucks so many. I mean, he sucked all of it in, right? Except for the 3 that got away and Rambeau and Park. Yeah.
Yeah. And now the whole team is gone except for those 3. 4.
I like the fact that she made them all into a big circus. I like the fact that all the sword agents became a giant circus. I thought that was really funny.
Just dissing them at the same time.
These fucking clowns.
There were a couple of Easter eggs I just wanted to point out. There's a bunch in here, but in particular, I thought that in this scene during the Halloween, they are walking by this movie theater, and in the background, you can see that the movies in this image for ants is The Incredibles and The Parent Trap. So a family of superheroes, as well as a movie where twins are tricking their parents. And I don't know if this is meaning Billy and Tommy are pulling a trick to trap Wanda. And this, once again, the demon spawns, the kids that seem to have manifest from nowhere and are able to age and de-age. Unlike every other person within this bubble, there's something weird going on with them.
Also,
or Wanda and Pietro.
Right. But if she dug up a corpse that happened to be in the graveyard and slapped a Pietro outfit on him, maybe that's what's going on there. I don't know.
This marquee with the movies is another signal that they're merging, late 90s, early 2000s, because The Incredibles came out in like 2004 and Parent Trap was late 90s.
Yeah, what's going on with this theater?
I don't know, man.
How is this their double billing? And then did I have they had Don't Go Past Ellis Avenue, which I thought maybe was a nod to Warren Ellis. That would be my guess. The comic book writer.
Did he write any of these Vision and Wanda books? Do we know?
I don't know. I didn't look it up.
I used to read Warren Ellis stuff, and I don't think so. I think
Yeah.
he went from. I think the closest he got was Excalibur, unless it was more modern than that. I know he did Moon Knight recently, but I don't know.
I know he did Next Wave with Monica Rambeau. That might.
Oh yeah, but that's a very different book.
Yeah. I love that book.
Yeah,
Aaron
if we can get the
Travis-
agents of hate into this universe, I am 100% on board.
It's not out of the question, considering what we're watching every week.
So all that said, where do you guys think they go with these last 3 episodes here?
Introduce Agents of Hate, obviously.
Okay. That's the solution. There you go. What do you think, Jeff?
I don't know. I'm wondering, actually, you TV dudes could probably tell me better than I, because I don't know anything about anything, but what would be a quintessential, if this is truly late 90s, early 2000s, what would you say was like the next popular family sitcom that would be a very broad cultural touchstone post Malcolm in the Middle?
Modern Family, right?
Modern Family?
Modern
so.
Family would be the
That was like 09, right? Modern Family, 09, 2010.
Don't ask me. I was way off with Malcolm in the Middle.
I remember reviewing the pilot for Modern Family for TV Squad back in the day, and I gave it a really negative review, and then it became like the biggest, most lauded like family sitcom of the era. I was like, oh,
I have no idea what this is.
That one wrong. Yeah, it seems like there's one particular screenshot that I keep seeing where Wanda is wearing like this blue flannel and she's like talking directly to the camera, and it looks just like the mom from Modern Family, almost like they just replaced her head to the point where I'm like, I think they're gonna mimic Modern Family. But what would they do for the team?
I was really hoping that they were going to go Breaking Bad, but I don't know. It seems to be getting further and further away.
I think the mockumentary style, if they were to borrow something off of The Office as well, it's not as much the family dynamic that they seem to be kind of gearing toward. But I was like, I don't know what the next one is. It'd be great if there was like some fresh off the boat thing that Randall Park could make a little cameo once he gets sucked into the world too. But yeah, I don't know how much more, like if we have one more episode of this decade thing, and then there's a 2-part finale with episodes 8 and 9, maybe that's where they go. Like the bubble grows out of control. I could see it fritzing and just jumping between genres, like that John Ritter movie, Stay Tuned, where it's just channel surfing within her own world. That'd be very ambitious, but I could see a show like this doing that.
I would love to see them dip into animation.
Oh man.
Ooh, yeah, that'd be good. Do you think that this is so asking for just like wild swings for the fences, but do we think that this ends with the merging of the X-Men universe into the MCU? Is that where we're going?
I'd loans just said they'll do an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. episode for the 10s.
That is a hot quake.
That's the worst.
They are definitely laying the groundwork, at least in our minds, to expect that that's going to happen with the introduction of Evan Peters and the idea of an MCU multiverse, right? Laying the groundwork for the X-Men to come in.
Yeah, they'd already hinted. Kevin Feige already hinted like, hey, we're going to bring the X-Men in a bit, but maybe in true Marvel fashion, they wanted to play their cards close to the chest and not say like, it's actually coming a little bit sooner than you think. If we have this bubble that Wanda's created and she does have some sort of complete breakdown outburst where this shoots across the entire planet, then it could be that maybe it's just enough radiation that people themselves don't manifest powers, but that next generation being born are all going to start showing, some of them are going to start mutating with X-Men powers. And then what they've already given birth to in the end of WandaVision is that if the MCU is still going in 15 years, we're gonna get those powers. The X-Men.
I want to say our chatters are hitting it out of the park. Mexicano says Rob Liefeld Avenue is the bad part of town.
Was that the cross street for Ellis? Was it like Ellis and Liefeld?
No, it wasn't. I don't remember what it was. It was some other kind of generic sounding street. But if they had a Liefeld Street, that'd be great. All right. Well, I think. Did you guys have any other closing thoughts?
I love this show. I love it so much. I'm gonna watch it every week. I'm gonna watch it, and I love it. And you should watch it too because it's awesome.
I'm excited for rewatch if they stick the landing. I'm excited for a rewatch because I think how they've structured this thus far just shows so much careful planning and consideration for details that they were threading through all of the episodes. And I think it'll definitely merit a rewatch.
I want to say that the show clicks for me a lot when like the huge emotional weight of Wanda's grief over her dead husband and brother and everything is fueling a scene or an episode, especially when that like thematically dovetails and connects with Monica Rambeau's grief over the loss of her mother. That stuff reminds me that despite all the crazy wackiness we're seeing in this series, that these characters are still grounded in relatable, like emotional areas. So I want to see more of that. Also, you talked about how all this is happening because of Wanda's emotional state and her grief, and that is creating this bubble that is encapsulating these people, right, and potentially changing the molecular structure of people, like we saw with Rambeau, and that could potentially lead to her doing that to the whole world and mutants popping up, right? And it kind of reminds me of your favorite thing from Star Trek Discovery, the burn, where the guy throwing an emotional tantrum had these huge ramifications for the entire universe. However, here, if they did that, like the emotional weight of it would land for how they're telling the story, unlike, it didn't in Star Trek. So I think they're doing a great job of just setting that up and making you really understand her pain and trauma. And even if she does end up being a villain, I see her as a not relatable, but I understand it,
Redeemable.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be the first time I think in the MCU that they've taken a hero and turned them into a proper villain, right? Because they've toggled with philosophical villainry between Iron Man and Captain America with like Civil War, but to be like, unless you want to argue Bucky Barnes, I don't know, but this would be like a good, like, just slide into villainry, even if their intent was good for herself and we are compassionate about that. She's fucking with some people's lives, and it'll be I'm hoping that they'll just lean into that and be like, yeah, she's bad, and now she needs to go on this journey through the multiverse of madness with Doctor Strange to find herself. That's the hope.
Sounds good.
Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in this week for MCU Pod. Remember that you guys can check us out over on Twitter at MCU Pod, on Facebook at the MCU Pod. We're over on Instagram as well. You can check all that out. Thank you to James Worm for helping us with our Instagram channel. Jeff, we want to thank you so much for joining us. And once again, where can people find you?
www.rageselect.com.
Do it. Go to rageselect.com. Mike, where can people find you?
Find me on Twitter at Mike Moody Garcia.
You can find me at Baron Von Grant. We are out for now, but next week you can tune in again at 9 p.m. Central when we are going to be discussing episode 7. Be sure to check it out and subscribe here so you get the notification when we go live. Until then, bye.